I think Oregon's got a great shot to win this week, and boy, they better for more reasons than one.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. What a deal that is. How easy of a fix is the offensive line? How much blame does Alik Terry get? That's coming up later on today's show. And your questions going into the game against the Beavs. So, cannot wait for it. Excited. Not going to have as much of a conflict with the Southern Utah game, so should be able to watch basically the whole thing live and react with you to every single play. And if Oregon goes 3 and out, we'll be firing Will Stein at halftime, the whole 9 yards. But when I think about this game and the implications, it's not as if Oregon can catapult themselves into the top 5 of the AP poll with a win here. It's not as if they can catapult themselves back into national championship, top 5 favorite conversation with this game. But there are a couple of reasons that Oregon absolutely has to win. Number one, you should win. You should win. Let's start there. This is probably pretty obvious to most people, I would think. But for those who don't keep up with the day-to-day, Oregon State, a team that the Ducks beat 31-7 last year, and certainly this Oregon team is not yet playing at the same level as what that team was last year in week 13 or 14, last week of the regular season. But still on paper, the Oregon team is much better. The coaching staff should also be much better. You have year 3 for Dan Lanning and company. You have year 1 on the other side. All the pressure on this game is on Oregon's side of things. Oregon State will be in the moral victories discussion. Is a literal victory possible? Yep, 100%. I've seen it before. I've seen it against this team. I've seen this version of Oregon struggle with this style of play, as I talked about in yesterday's show. Oregon State can win the game if Oregon doesn't show up. But if Oregon does show up and they play the way that they are capable, they'll go out and win the game by multiple possessions, and they will ease the minds of Duck fans. And that's the second point. You got the pressure on Dan Lanning because it's not a strong start. They've gone from the preseason number 3 team in the country down to number 9, 7, 9. I think it's 9 last time I checked. It's not great. It's not great. It's been 2 unimpressive performances. The Boise State game, I think, was much better than the Idaho one. You're going up against higher level competition, and a number of things were objectively better, but some things regressed. The defense regressed from week 1 to week 2. They show a lot of potential. They show a lot of promise, but the week 1 performance was a lot stronger. Well, if you go out and give up 10 points to the Beavs on the road, that'd make Oregon fans feel better at the very least. At the very least. But year 3, better roster on paper, trying to push for a national championship. Of course, you have the rivalry factor. You know, Dan Lanning has not had a great track record so far against Oregon's rivals. He's 1-1 against Oregon State, 0-3 against Washington. So this is an area where Duck fans are certainly going to look to Dan Lanning and say, hey, you got to win this football game. There's no excuse. There's no reason, barring an injury to Oregon's top 3 quarterbacks in the same game, that Oregon should go out and lose the football game. And frankly, even if, God forbid, Dylan Gabriel were to get hurt, Oregon should still win the football game. So all the pressure is certainly on Oregon here. It's not doubting my confidence or lowering my confidence in Oregon's ability to do it, but certainly this is a game that you look at and say, yeah, if you're going to compete for a Big Ten championship, if you're going to live up to the expectations, this is a game that you go out and win. I think for Oregon fans, there's a personal component as well. But the second reason why I look at Oregon and say, boy, you really do need to win this game, Ohio State is not that far away. It's not. The day this show is airing, 1 month. You got 1 month to get ready for the Buckeyes. And if you want to prove to yourselves and to the country, and make no mistake about it, in the subjective world of college football, that absolutely matters. You've got to go out and at least put up a good showing against Ohio State. And if Oregon plays the way they have the last couple weeks, it's not going to go very well. Ohio State will run for 300 yards at Autzen Stadium, and Oregon will lose the game by 15 to 20 points if they play that way. But you can reassure a lot of Oregon fans that that game can live up to the hype, that Oregon can win that game, that they can compete for a national championship if you go out and put up a dominant win this week. So I think it's going to be really fun. The environment's going to be awesome. It's always fun to watch Civil War. I think that this game should always and forever continue to be played no matter what, because I am a sucker for history and tradition. Sue me. But Oregon's got to win the football game. I think there's plenty of pressure on Lanning. You don't have to go out and win the game, 45-2. I don't know why I picked 2. 45-3. It doesn't have to be something like that. But at some point, the team has to show progress, or I think a lot of us, and maybe even, probably not themselves, but a lot of us at the outset are going to question, are they going to beat Ohio State? Are they going to compete for a Big Ten championship? Are they as good as Penn State? Are they as good as USC? They haven't looked at so far. Doesn't mean they can't showcase it. One of you sent in a question that I wanted to get to on this game as well. If you ever want to send in a mailbag question, we'll get to plenty of them on today's show. YouTube comments, X, formerly known as Twitter, or become a Locked On Ducks insider and get priority access and all sorts of other perks. That link is in the description below. Metalli Duck sends in this one. Quick cue. Today is with Oregon struggles compared to Oregon State. What do you think the reason is for the spread to grow from 14 to 16.5? Thanks as always. So that number actually came down. It was 20.5. But because Oregon has struggled, they brought it down to 14.5. Now, 20.5 is where Vegas thinks the line should be. And guess what? It is where the line should be. The reason they brought it down to 14 is because they're trying to have 50% of the money on either side, and they know with the way Oregon has played, more than half of the money would come in on Oregon State plus 20.5. That line moving back out to 16.5 is reflective of once it dropped down to 14, people felt, whether it's the public or whether it's the sharps, hard to tell, somebody or some groups of people feel that dropping it down to 14 is an overreaction. And I think this is a good way to set expectations for the game if you were an Oregon fan. A good performance is covering that number. A good performance is winning by 20 to 30 points. I mean, that'd be a great performance, frankly, because I think this Oregon State team is at least okay. But you have a third-year head coach against a first-year, first-time head coach. You should have the advantage there. Your staff should have the advantage across the board. Every single position group, you should have the talent advantage. It's a matter of whether your guys are ready to play and whether the scheme fits the talent level that you've got on the field. If you have those things, Oregon State can't keep up. If you don't, could have a repeat of 2022. But if Oregon's winning by somewhere in the 20-point range, like if the final score is, 38-20, that should settle a lot of concerns for Oregon fans. But if this ends up being, comes down to a last-second field goal and Atticus Sappington's got to kick a game winner against his own team, then we're asking the same sorts of questions that we've been asking for the last couple of weeks. And I hope that Oregon doesn't get down to that situation. Do I think it is reasonable to think that Oregon State can put up that sort of fight? Yeah. They're going to be intensely motivated. Crowd's going to be on fire. Should be a really, really fun day. 1:30 p.m. on Fox. More on that a little bit later. The offensive line is one of the biggest questions going into this game for the Ducks, though. Without question. Whose fault is it exactly? That's coming up next. First, you should fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. They have 35 different meals, more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore, which is one of the many reasons that makes Factor so great and why you should head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box, plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Treat yourself to restaurant quality meals with Factor Meals. Go to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50. Use that code LockedOnCollege50. Check out Factor Meals today. You won't regret it. Have you checked out FanDuel yet? Boy, you should if you haven't. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5, $5, and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel any time. And if that's not enough, be sure to check out FanDuel's Profit Boost in the app and use it for FanDuel's Double Your Winnings for all of Sunday, September 15th, pregame moneyline bets. Profit Boost will be live starting Thursday, September 12th. View your account page to learn more about how you boost. So, check out FanDuel.com. That's America's #1 sportsbook. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and our official sportsbook sponsor here at the Locked On Network. One of the Locked On Ducks insiders out there sent me this question, which means, of course, you get priority access in the mailbag. So, amongst other perks, you get a free 14-day trial. That link is in the description below. Certainly not a requirement if you want to get in the mailbag. But here's how this question came about and what it says. How much criticism should be on Terry, the O-line coach, for the inconsistencies given the injuries? I've heard whispers that he should be on the hot seat, but I don't agree at this point personally. Thanks, Spencer. Go Ducks. Don't know where those whispers would be coming from. Terry was hired ahead of last season when Adrian Clem, who was really good, left for the NFL. I'm not jumping into the fire League Terry if the game doesn't go well sort of camp. That's I think whatever rumors you're hearing, wildly overblown. Terry is incredibly respected for a guy his age, and this might just be part of the learning curve as a young head coach, or as a young assistant coach, position group coach. Dan Lanning went through those sorts of learning curves as a first-year head coach. He showed a lot of promise. He made some mistakes. He showed more promise in year 2. Still wasn't perfect. No one is as good as they will be in their first year or second year as a coach, whether that's a position coach, a coordinator, or as a head coach. So I don't think Elite Terry is solely to blame. I think two things with the offensive line. And look, they themselves can make a statement more than any other position group going into this game. Without a shadow of a doubt. The receivers, exactly how I thought they looked. The tight ends, the running backs, the D-line. I think the linebackers have been a little hit and missed, but I think that's because Jeff Bossa is dinged up and he got hurt against Idaho, but Bryce Betcher's been great. Devin Jackson has played some nice football. The secondary, go look at some of the plays if you forgot that they made against Boise State in the passing game. They looked fantastic. Maddox Madsen was 18 of 40 passing the ball. You do that again this week, you're probably winning the football game. Or at least you should be, because I'd hope, but we'll see, you can hold this Oregon State rushing attack under 200 yards. If you do that, you're 100% winning the football game. I don't think Giovanni McCoy and the receivers that they have are going to be able to go out and just torch this Oregon secondary. We know Jabbar Muhammad's good. Brandon Johnson's having an awesome start to his Oregon career. But Nico Reed has played well. I think the safeties have been, okay, but the corners in particular, they've been awesome. So I think the defensive line also been great. There is no unit that we have more questions about or there's more discussed on this show or any other Oregon podcast out there than the offensive line. So for Elite Terry to say, well, hey, maybe he's young and making an adjustment, like it could be. It could also be you lost a Remington Award winner, which Oregon's never had before. Think about the great centers that Oregon has had. None of them were as good compared to their peers in all of college football as Jackson Powers Johnson. When you factor in that that's the position group, or that's the position rather in that group that is making the calls, the offensive line that's getting everybody situated, that needs to have great chemistry with the quarterback, maybe it shouldn't be a surprise that there's an adjustment period here. I am not punting on Elite Terry. And while we're on the subject of assistant coaches, I'm not punting on Will Stein either. I don't think those guys have their position groups or sides of the ball playing at the highest level that they will this season. I don't know that every unit or any unit was playing at its highest level through 2 weeks last season. I talked about this earlier this week. I'm pretty sure. I mean, the shows blend together at some point, but Week 10 Oregon plays Texas Tech and Lubbock last year and wins the game by 2 touchdowns. But Week 2 Oregon wasn't quite perfect. Running the ball, not great. Penalties, sloppy. By the end of the year, penalties have been cleaned up. Offensive line was getting a push. Run game was there. I have faith they're going to be able to figure it out. So I think for Alik Terry, there isn't a quick fix to replacing the most important position on the offensive line. I know people could go to left tackle, but I think with the quarterback of the unit role that a center plays, I think it's the hardest position to replace. And then you factor in that Jackson Powers Johnson also just did not allow pressures. And he also blew guys off the ball. He was his second, third round pick of the Raiders. I think it was second round maybe. I forget. But he was an early round pick for a reason. He's really, really good. And then you throw a wrinkle into that group where you take Matthew Bedford and you say, oh yeah, he's hurt and can't go to begin the season. That's not the way the offensive line practiced in spring camp. That's not the way they practiced in fall camp. And that unit, more than any other position group, certainly on the offensive side of the ball, but probably on the defensive side as well, I think secondary would be the other one. Communication, continuity, consistency is of the utmost importance. It might just not be a quick fix. Oregon's offensive line might be better this week. They still might not be great. Gabriel might get sacked 2 or 3 times. Maybe the running game is a little bit better. I don't think that unit has just a one-size-fits-all solution of, it just has to be this. James Crepea of the Oregonian reported that both centers have been taking snaps this week, both Charlie Pickard and Poncho. From our vantage point, the offensive line looks better when Poncho's at center, Nishad Strother is at left guard, and Marcus Harper is at right guard. But the coaches are seeing a lot more of that football team than we are, and they know a lot more than we do. Now, maybe they're just getting both guys ready, but I think that if you're still looking at that position and saying, we can have both these guys, there's something there that they feel like Charlie can bring to the table. Maybe it's snapping consistency. Maybe it's his communication with Gabriel. Maybe it's, I don't know. There are a million different things, but it is easy to look at the first 2 weeks and think it is going to be like this for the rest of the season. I don't believe that is the case. If it is, then we assess why it went that way, what went wrong, and who's to blame. But I think that it's too early to say it's this player's fault, it's that coach's fault, and they're not being good. Like, it's a collective effort, and it's going to be a collective effort to improve, and getting Matthew Bedford might be helpful as well. So that's what I feel about the offensive line. Another question came from an insider who asked, pod question, I know you were at your other job, but did you get to see the Peacock quote-unquote coverage? Oof, shots fired. What was your assessment? My one positive, I did not count any Bo Nix brother comments. That's good. That's a good one. I did watch and listen to basically the entire fourth quarter once the Southern Utah game wrapped up. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. It was pretty bad, as a matter of fact. As bad as we have seen. The Pac-12 network did a better job. The announcers at times felt like they were disconnected from the game. They had some technical difficulties, and I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt and say they were working in some new camera people. Wasn't good. Here's the good news. This week, A-team. Jason Benetti, Brock Heward, Allison Williams. On Fox. No questions. No, I think Benetti is fantastic. I think Heward is sensational. I could listen to Brock Heward talk about football for a very, very long time. So I think the broadcast coverage will be better this week than it was last week. Hopefully the on-field product matches that as well, because that's what matters most at the end of the day. But I appreciate a question about the broadcast quality, because I can assure you, having the career that I do, I pay attention to it more than anybody I know nonstop. And the Peacock coverage, they didn't have a good day. Happens. But let's call a spade a spade. It was bad. It was bad. I'm sure they'll get better, but that was not a very good day. Hopefully Oregon's offensive line has a good day. Gosh, that would make everything so much easier. Still a couple more mailbag questions to get to because a couple of you have thoughts about, well, the team. Why isn't it working yet? I'll try and answer that question coming up next. Before I finish up today's show, let's talk about LinkedIn Jobs. Why? Well, because when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, then guess what? You're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. You know why? They know where the bread gets buttered, and they know that they're the best. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, couple more mailbag questions. By the way, drop your score predictions below. I haven't made my score prediction yet. I haven't even told you if I think Oregon's going to win the game yet. Spoiler, I think they're going to win the football game. But what's my score prediction going to be? You're going to have to tune into tomorrow's show to find out. So this one came in from Bobby. Hey, Spencer, this offseason was about the team building chemistry and connection, but I feel like we haven't seen that pay off on the field. At what moments do you think we have seen it show up? And at what points do you think we'll need for it to show up to win a game? The connections built this offseason should be limiting our mistakes. Of course, there have been injuries, but teams have injuries on the offensive line all the time. Next man up should be more than able to fill the gap on a roster this talented and deep. So, an important thing to remember, Bobby, amidst the struggles that Oregon has had through the first couple of games. They're 2-0. They probably won't be undefeated forever. Feels like there's going to be, if they continue at this rate, one loss or more on the regular season schedule. But winning the games does mean something. It does. And I think it galvanizes the locker room in a way that helps them understand what needs to improve and why it needs to improve. Like Dan Lanning said after the Idaho game, I'm disappointed in the process, not the result. And I think if you continue to drive that message home, you create a chip on these guys' shoulder that maybe they lost coming into the year. Maybe they drank too much rat poison. Maybe people listen to this show or watch this show and listen to me say, yeah, this Oregon team is going to be really good across the board. The roster's awesome. These guys are great. I think they'll beat Ohio State on October 12th and go 12-0. Maybe they listen to that too much. But the good news is as they're trying to figure out how their chemistry works and how they come together, they're winning football games. So Oregon is playing, a D+, C- version of what the potential of this team is, and they're 2-0. And I know Idaho's not a big-time opponent. Boise State is not a slouch. You look up at the end of the year, Boise State might have won 11 football games, make the college football playoff. And you look back and go, that was a pretty good win. Not the best win of the year if they were to, say, beat Ohio State or win at Michigan or at Wisconsin, or we'll see what Washington ends up being this season. But you could look back and say, that was a tough game. You know why? Boise State, good team. But as to your question about when the connections have shown up, I saw a jump in the offense from week 1 to week 2, particularly in the passing game. I think the chemistry between Will Stein, the offensive coordinator, Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, and the wide receivers, I think it took a step forward. And that's why you saw the downfield shots. And I think that has to continue, not just against Oregon State, but against everybody going forward. You have to have a downfield presence. It doesn't need to be, 2019 LSU where every other pass is a 50-yard bomb, but it needs to look the way it did against Boise State last week, with the ability to create explosive plays, to move the ball down the field in a chunk fashion, to create a long touchdown. Like the momentum that was created in the game where Tez Johnson had the punt return against Boise State and then immediately a long touchdown to Evan Stewart, that does a lot. And as we know, momentum is huge. But Oregon then had plays where they shot themselves in the foot. Patrick Herbert fumbled. Dylan Gabriel fumbled after the ball was snapped to him by Charlie Pickard when he shouldn't have. And I understand Gabriel wanting to avoid taking the loss, but at that point, he's a veteran guy. He's got to know, oh, wow, I just caught a snap I wasn't supposed to have. I should just go down. I should just go down, eat it, or if I'm going to run, better make sure I hold on to the football, and he didn't. I don't think those sorts of mistakes are going to continue. This team is too veteran, I think, for that to be the case. But when I look at the chemistry this team has, I think it's shown up in the way they executed on special teams. I think it's shown up in the way that their run game started to find its footing, particularly on the last drive. I mean, Oregon lines up on a 3rd and 1, and Boise State knows they're running, and Oregon clears a path. Jordan James gets 11, 12 yards. That is what this Oregon team is supposed to be able to do from the jump against teams like Boise, Idaho, and yes, Oregon State this week. But I don't think there's a lack of connection. I think there's just a number of new faces. There are several key returners, as I talked about all offseason, but there are enough new faces to where it takes some time. It's not always going to look perfect. And if by week 4 or 5, the same things are happening, then you can start to feel concerned. I understand Oregon fans paying attention or having a moderate concern level about what this Oregon team is and how they can come together, whether they can look like the team that they are on paper. Through 2 games, the more I've thought about this, the more I think this is true. Through 2 games, I saw a step forward, but there's still more steps to take. But that's what's happened each of the last couple of seasons. You think week 1 in 2022 against Georgia, they played as good a football as they did later in the year when, say they played UCLA, who was undefeated and ranked in the top 10. College game day was in town. You think they played the same that day? No, they played a lot better. Why? They'd had some time in game settings. So new center, new quarterback, those are big leadership positions. And I think that we're seeing the challenges that losing 2 guys that were as good and as important to the team as JPJ and Bo Nix were on display in the first couple of weeks. And that new chemistry just has to be formed. So hope that answers your question. This one came in from the Camel. Because why not? Spencer, it seems the Ducks are lacking discipline on the field. If you indulge me and assume my premise, how does Lanning coach for that? If it's not athletic ability, good scheming, or football prowess, it seems it's a lack of focus. How to fix it? Some of it is the chemistry that I was just talking about, which can only come with time. But some of it is the ability to go through practice and harp on the fundamentals. You go to practice and say, hey, we're running a 2-minute offense here. Everybody's got to be on the same page every play. Like, I can't say I know this for sure because I haven't been in Oregon's practice or seen how they or other high-level programs run their college football practices. But you're talking about coaching discipline. You have drills. Every coach has got drills. Every coach has got ideas about how to message the players and about how to coach them on, hey, we had a fumbling problem or we had a snapping problem. Here's how we fix that in practice. Or, hey, we're not running this offensive play right. We've called it twice in each of the last couple of weeks, and it hasn't worked. We're gonna sit here at practice, and we're gonna run it until it's run right, and then we're gonna run it 3 more times. Anything you think about on that front, that's what Lanning's doing right now. That's what he's looking for. Hey, offensive line, you didn't fire off the ball in the right time. Or, hey, you didn't have a snap count. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again. That's what it has to come down to. That discipline has to be instilled at practice, and I don't think there's any other way to do it, at least not that I'm aware of. That's why these guys are coaches. Crazy thing, and I'll close with this. If you've never talked to a college coach before, which I have the great privilege of doing every single week, these guys have more information that they have forgotten than you or I will ever know about football. I don't think Dan Lanning is going to practice and he's clueless on how to fix these problems. You know how I know that? Because last year, Oregon had penalty issues early in the season. Guess what? It got cleaned up. I don't know exactly what drill they did to do that. I don't know exactly what those methods were. I know that they've got them, though. You don't get into this position unless you have proven the ability to coach those sorts of things out of players, to fix those mistakes, to help them improve and be the best versions of themselves. And I'm telling you, all these coaches at every position group know a crazy amount of information about football. And when I get to talk to these sorts of guys in a private one-on-one setting, and not just in football, in any sport, the way they think about and see the game is so different from you and me. It's so different. But what you have to have faith in is that Dan Lanning is aware of the issues. Of course he is. If we're seeing it, I'm sure he's seeing it. And he knows there are things to clean up, and he said that in his press conferences. And I don't have a lack of faith in Dan's ability to clean those things up. It's just that Oregon fans, understandably, might want a quick fix, and everything might not have it. I think that's enough show for today. Appreciate everyone listening. Thanks for making this your first listen. Go make Locked On College Football your second. I keep you covered with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. That's on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.